watching The Tudors. I'm Heather.
And I'm Jonathan.
And this is the show where we go back and watch The Tudors and talk about the history behind the drama. And just as the backstory, I have another podcast, the Renaissance English History podcast, which I started in 2009. And I thought it would be fun to go back and watch The Tudors with somebody who has never known anything about 16th century England, and we can talk about what's real and what's not, and that's you.
I thought it could be fun to learn about this subject that's so interesting to my wife by watching an entertaining television show, which is right up my alley. No books needed or anything, so I'm learning a lot, and I can see the intrigue.
Awesome. You know what I remembered is that for my birthday in 2009, I think it was, you bought me a DVD set of The Tudors.
Wow.
I just remembered that.
I had no idea.
Yeah, you did. And you also took me to Olive Garden that day.
That's something.
Yeah. And we stopped at the mall, and I got something at the Bare Minerals counter at Sephora.
My memory is so horrible.
Yeah, so we have a history of the Tudors together.
How cool.
Yeah. Okay, so that's our introduction. To learn more about us and about my other podcast, you can go to watchingthetudors.com. And also, just a quick reminder, we are now officially part of the Agora Podcast Network. Yeah. So please also go to the agorapodcastnetwork.com to check out all of the great podcasts in that network. My other podcast is also in there, but there's a lot of really great stuff to listen to. So check that out for more on history and humanities. And
I'm moving up in the world.
Right.
I feel important.
And also really important, if you like this show, please go ahead and give us a rating on iTunes. It really helps new people find the show. And I think that is it. We'll just go right into this. Is season 2, episode 2, and it's called Tears of Blood. And there's a lot of stuff happening.
And we didn't give our little disclaimer that we're going to talk about things that happen in future episodes, and
spoiler alert.
Yeah, just in the future. So, watch the episode before you listen to this. And also, if you're not totally up on Tudor history, you may hear about things that happen in future episodes / in the later history of all of this story.
Exactly. So
be warned.
That's the spoiler alert. Okay, let's go right into your questions.
All right. So, did people play with cards? At the beginning, she has someone's, doing something nefarious with cards, and
yeah, no, for sure. Playing cards actually came from China. They go way back, prehistory, couple thousand years. They're actually Persian as well, India, Persia, China, all kinds of stuff there.
Yeah.
And they came into Europe through the Iberian Peninsula, where we live, through the Moors. So they came around the second half of the 14th century. They came into Europe, and they would have played with playing cards, yes. And they looked very similar to ours and had very similar games as ours.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And so then there was I guess, is it Parliament?
Yes.
So they were having a vote of some sort? What was that?
This is, again, that we talked last time about the Reformation Parliament, which is this parliament that sat during this time period, and they are known as the Reformation Parliament, and they're the ones who voted all of these reforms through, and what they're doing here is naming Henry the supreme head of the Church of England. So no longer is the Pope the head, Henry is the head of the Church of England. It's saying we have our own church in England, and Henry's the head.
Okay, so that's all going on there.
Mm-hmm.
And then Catherine, did she keep sending him gifts, as alluded to?
Yeah, she did.
Poor girl.
Yeah. Well, you could say that, or you could also say it was calculating, but
I'm saying it.
Yeah, I know you've made some comments.
I have a soft spot for Catherine, and I don't like that Anne girl.
I know I haven't even checked the notifications on the Facebook page because I don't want to see
the vitriol.
Yeah.
Bring it.
No, don't bring it, because I have to read that stuff. I just want you to know this is him talking.
It's all directed at me.
Yes.
This is not influenced by anything but my own opinion.
Okay.
Based on a dramatic television show produced in...
Because, I would like to remind you that Catherine had ample opportunities to have a really great life. And she was already in menopause. I'm not necessarily saying that Catherine's bad either. I'm just trying to say that, to be fair, These people were all humans. They all were going through their thing. She could have had a really great life living in a nunnery where she could have prayed all day, because that's what she was into. Could have still had her daughter with her. Could have still been Henry's friend. Could have still had all of the titles and everything that she wanted. But the one that she was going to have to give up was being queen, and she did not want to give that up. And even years
that's
after,
one way to look at it. Yeah.
even years after she realized that she wasn't going to win this one, she's sending him gifts.
Yep.
And you could say,
I could say that she was in love with Henry, and Henry could have spent his life with a woman who was dedicated to him, who had a daughter with him, who ended up being the queen anyways.
no, yeah, okay.
Yeah, and like they could have lived happily ever after, and it would have been
But
really
if he
nice.
would have done that, Elizabeth I, Queen Elizabeth, never would have become.
Yeah, well, I don't know anything about what you're talking about because we haven't gotten that far in the story. So
Right, okay.
okay,
All right.
apparently there's an Elizabeth one day.
Of course you know that. Elizabethan, Shakespeare.
Okay, well,
Yeah,
no,
okay.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know anything.
All right.
I'm being
Yeah.
honest.
No, I
Okay,
understand.
so-
He really is being honest.
I really don't.
No, he really is.
I don't remember what I bought you that I bought you the DVD set. So
Yeah.
never mind.
Somebody wrote in
Ancient
iTunes
history.
review that you must be faking
No,
how dumb you are about this.
I'm really good at math. I'm not kidding. I'm really good with computers, history. I'm just pretty stupid. Like,
yeah, so Queen
legitimately.
Elizabeth beat the Spanish Armada. Shakespeare.
Our Spanish Armada was boats.
Yeah, okay. No, I'm with you.
I got nothing.
I'm with you. Okay, so we have
I'm not pretending.
you hate Anne Boleyn and you love Catherine.
And I feel bad for Catherine.
Onwards.
Sweet Catherine.
Oh, stop it.
So, so Henry, like, being against the clergy, is this seriously all for his divorce? Like,
Well, okay,
I mean,
let's talk
does
about
he really
that.
have? Okay.
Kings throughout history, throughout English history especially, have wanted to find ways to get around the clergy because the church was the largest landowner in England, and there's a lot of money there. There's also a lot of corruption, and we talked about that, I think, with all of their saying that they had all of the relics and stuff like that.
Yep.
That if you had all the pieces of the true cross and put them on a pile,
Yeah, it would,
just
like,
in
be a
England,
mountain.
yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah.
So, I think that kings often were frustrated by this. And I think that Henry, he was a good son of the church. He saw himself as a good son of the church. And if this had never happened with Anne, he would have probably gone to his grave being a good son of the church. And he really saw himself that way. Now, with that said, suddenly seeing that there were perhaps some opinions that would suit him,
Kind of gave him different colored glasses. It wasn't
Yeah.
necessarily just about the divorce. But
right. And then he suddenly saw that, maybe his father left him a lot of money in the treasury was packed full when he first inherited, but he had some unsuccessful wars with France. He built a navy. He did a lot of refurbishments to palaces. He was kind of running out of money. So to suddenly say, oh, look, here's an opportunity to get something from the largest. And, the church didn't pay taxes to him. They paid to the Pope. So I think that started to influence him.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yes.
And then, they had the party, and the guy was saying, this party kind of sucks. Was Henry kind of ruining court, with
Yeah.
all of this drama going around?
No, and I think your next question about is did the government shut down and all that kind
No,
of
just
stuff?
just further, is he kind of ruining the country, with all of
Yeah.
this drama?
No, not really. I mean, it's true that government work kind of stopped. Everything was devoted to him other than the absolute necessities of anything. But, Anne had her own shadow court. So there were still ladies around. People were vying for, once it became clear that Anne was going to be queen, she had her own household and she had her own ladies in waiting and everything like that. So, it wasn't like that there was this boring court.
Okay.
So,
Wasn't
yeah.
just in shambles or something?
No.
All right.
There was a lot of drama. I mean, talk about I was just watching The Bachelorette because that's my guilty pleasure. And they were talking about the drama in the house. I can only imagine the drama at the court between
Yeah.
people choosing and, oh, you're going to go work for Anne. Well, she's, what you think about her and all of it. Yeah. So.
And other people jumping on the bandwagon because
Yeah.
they can smell what's cooking.
Exactly.
All right. Next question, Anne and Wyatt. Are the rumors true? I mean, I know you don't have inside knowledge, but
Yeah.
can you shed some light on
It's
that?
been a rumor that has persisted for a long time, and there's no actual evidence that they were anything other than, courtly love, that there was actually ever any kind of a physical relationship. Now, it's very possible that he looked at her from afar and had crushes on her, and he was one of the people who was accused of adultery with her once were in the future, and once she was accused of adultery, he was one of the people that was accused of committing adultery, but he actually was the only one that wasn't found guilty.
Yeah, you were saying he like actually made it through.
Exactly.
With head.
Yeah, he kept his head. I think that if he would have, that probably...
If there was even like a sliver of a doubt, like, okay.
Yeah. So, but I do think that he probably had a crush on her and probably would have liked to, and that part is probably quite true.
So Cranmer?
Thomas Cranmer, yeah.
Cranmer, was he the envoy to the emperor, as was sort of mentioned?
Yeah, he actually did become an ambassador to the emperor. So that part's true.
And I'm guessing he ends up dying. Like, it seems like a tough spot to put a guy like that.
Well, I'll tell you what, he does die, but it's not under Henry. He dies under Mary Tudor. She, of course, was raised Catholic, so once she becomes queen, she has got a lot of beef with the Protestants.
And he's kind of like the guy
the one who
started it, if you
he's the one who
that.
put all of this into motion and gave us. So he was
public
on her
enemy number one.
He was on her shit list for sure.
Yeah. He should be worried.
Yes, he should.
Did Anne really want Brandon banished?
So there's a lot of beef between the Boleyns and Brandon that started around this time. And there's actually a lot of articles and books written about, like, why did they have fights with each other and stuff like that. And there's a couple of reasons why they might have. To start with, Brandon was super close to Henry. He grew up with Henry, and, Anne could have been quite jealous of this person, and she probably would have wanted him to like her, but it became clear that Brandon is married to Henry's sister, who herself was the Queen of France, and so they don't take this whole putting aside the queen thing lightly. She still has she was the Queen of France. The sister never supported Anne Boleyn, never ever. She made it really, really clear. She left court and she said, and so that's part of that. And I think Charles Brandon probably would have been on her side, and probably also respected the Queen and Catherine, and thought that, who is this upstart and all of that kind of stuff as well. And there might have been some jealousy between Anne and Charles Brandon over Henry's attentions. Yeah. So there were a lot of different levels to that.
And Brandon makes it through, like, all of it, right?
Yes.
So in the end, who wins?
Yeah, for sure.
All right. So Anne found the cards on her table.
Yes.
Like, you mentioned that was a thing.
That really happened.
That really happened.
Mm-hmm.
And she said
it was like a drawing or something like that, I think.
Or something like
yeah.
that. And she said, like, oh, there's a book of prophecy about whatever. Like, what is that, a term? Is that a thing?
Well, prophecies at this time it was a really big thing. One thing, for example, it was actually illegal to draw up the horoscope of the king, because it was illegal to think about the king's death. But people were constantly drawing up prophecies or drawing up horoscopes and reading the prophetic books of the Bible. So it was really popular to read Revelations, and people thought they were in the end times. People always thought they were in the end times. Like, now people think we're in the end times. That's been going on for like a long time, that people thought. And,
can I just say real quick, like, it's amazing. I know you've said this, and like historians are always arguing about how history repeats itself, and if you want to understand what's going on now, like, it's important to understand what's going on then. It's like really amazing to me how parallel things are, like similar, like right now. Like, I was just thinking about the United States situation with the government, and how like the media isn't trusted, and it seems like you can draw a parallel between the monarchy and the White House and the clergy and the media, because they're like the dispellers of like information and holders of sort of influential power over the masses, and how there's sort of tension between the two groups, and then like you were just saying about prophecy, like it was illegal to think about the king's death, and like even now it's still a law, like you can't say that you're gonna hurt the president or whatever. And it's just interesting that like we're so far removed from that in years.
Yeah.
But like there's still these sort of traditions. And even though it's like a totally different setup, it's like we don't have kings and monarchs anymore.
Yeah.
But like it's very interesting to me. I'm starting to see the truth in that.
And it's interesting. One of the things, actually, somebody just commented on my Facebook page on Renaissance English History podcast about that they've started being like me and being interested in the life of everyday people and everyday lives. And so the thing about the Tudors and what I want to do out of this is like the show is, there's lots of drama. It's like watching The Bachelor, and there's all the drama and the soap opera and stuff of it. But beyond that, these are real people, and these are real humans, and these are people whose lives are affected. And not only that, but like this show is like basically watching Celebrity Apprentice or like, Celebrity Real World or something like that. Like this isn't how everyday people lived, but I'm fascinated about how everyday people lived, because the thing is we have different packaging on our issues now. So like I have packaging around distractions with Facebook or, whatever your particular thing is. But the problems are still the same. The issues are still the same, and they have been, and they always will be. And they're the same that Ovid wrote about and thousands of years ago, and they're the same 500 years ago. And it's like just different packaging. And that's what I really love, because I feel like understanding those things, it's a little bit easier from a distance. Like I don't know about you because you seem to really hate Anne Boleyn, but I think that it's easier to look at somebody that you might disagree with 500 years ago and kind of empathize a little bit and understand where they were coming from, because you don't have the emotion that you have now.
Yeah.
But I think that that's the next logical step, right? So you could, for example, practice your empathy skills and start to really get into Anne Boleyn's head and figure out why she was doing stuff, right? And once you do that, you're not actually that far away removed from looking at somebody that you really disagree with politically now.
Like right now. Yeah.
And being able to say, okay, well, maybe this, and this. And so that's why I always say that studying history is like all about connecting yourself more deeply to humanity. And I feel like that's why you do this stuff. Like that's why we read about this stuff and why it still fascinates us, because it's just different packaging, but it's all the same. Humanity is the same.
All the same stuff. Interesting.
Yeah, there you go. That's your
thing.
That's
your
my
spiel.
That's my unsolicited speech.
So back to this. Brandon really got kicked out of court
again. Well, I
like
think
the
there were
second time.
times when he left and he was kicked out, and they're collapsing a whole lot of different time periods here with relation to him. He had a weird relationship there for a while with Henry and with Anne.
Okay, so they're just sort of painting the strange back and forth relationship. George Throckmorton, is that his name? Who's this guy? I guess we're going to learn more about him later.
Well, I don't know actually that we will. I think he was later involved in the Pilgrimage of Grace actually, so we might. But he was a minor nobility guy who I think his father had served with Henry VII. Then later on, his family actually still, his descendants still have the family name and the family seat and everything like that in England. And he was just a Catholic who was in favor of Catherine, and I think later on he would start to do some work with rebels, and the Throckmorton plot was later on involving Mary Queen of Scots decades later, so his family stays involved in this for a little bit, but I don't know that he himself will.
Does a whole lot. Okay. And then the friar at the church.
Yes.
Like, was that like a real thing where someone called out Henry kind of in front of everyone?
Yeah, actually there were a lot of different things going on like this at that time. There was a very famous woman called the Maid of Kent, Elizabeth Barton, who said she had visions and prophecies. She said that if Henry put aside Catherine, he wouldn't live for 6 months after. There were prophecies that dogs would drink Henry's blood, which actually, incidentally, did happen, because after he died, his body exploded in the coffin, and dogs drank his blood. There you go.
Ew.
Yeah, well,
whatever.
Okay, so that did actually happen.
Yeah.
And so, there were a lot of preachers doing things like this, and then the other way around too. Like Anne would use preachers to her benefit by wanting to have people, preach sermons about how
her way.
Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting because, you know, we look at like talking head pundits on cable news, for example, to make an analogy again about like the US. And I think it's interesting because it's like that would be the pundits of the time.
Mm-hmm.
There you
So,
go.
cool. Now we're going to take a tiny little break, and we'll be back right on the other side.
Yeah, we're taking our commercial break. Thank you.
Okay.
Good reminder.
See you in a few seconds.
Okay. And we're back.
So, my next question is kind of about More, Thomas More,
Yes.
just in general. Like, you know, when I was watching, I was thinking, oh man, he's like really not living his truth. But then, you know, the next scene is like he's asking to be dismissed or whatever you want to say. Like, did he really like request to be let go, if you will? And,
Yeah, he resigned.
and he was allowed to resign. It wasn't like
Yeah, and he actually resigned on this. It was like right around the time that they voted him to be the supreme head of the church as far as the law of God allows. And he resigned like right after that. So it was seen
he's like,
as,
I don't want any part of this.
and it was a blow to Henry because it was really public. I mean, like we see More in the context of his role with Henry, but More was famous throughout Europe as a humanist and, you know, writing Utopia and all of that kind of stuff. So what he said mattered.
Yeah,
And
so him stepping down, like, especially being made the head, like,
yeah,
really said
like
something.
right the day after, whatever, it was really, it was a blow to Henry.
Yeah, and he eventually got killed, huh?
Yeah, he wouldn't take the oath of the supremacy, the recognizing that Catherine's marriage was invalid and that Anne was the valid queen. He wouldn't take the oath of that. I guess the oath of succession, something like that. And
He is a man of what his word kind of, like, he really stands up, or his virtues, or,
yeah,
yeah, that's something.
yeah.
I think I just say, okay, whatever. Don't
Right.
kill me.
You know, it's funny because that reminds me of during the later on, decades later, when people were policing your worship in churches, they would put these little holes up in the roofs where people would peek through and watch parishioners to see what they were doing, because some people would actually cross their fingers when they were saying prayers because they were actually Catholics and it was like Protestant prayers or something like that. And so they would be on the lookout for people who would cross their fingers behind their back, showing that they were just saying the prayer, but they didn't actually mean it. And so that was something, you just reminded me of that.
That's something. That is just, it's just,
Yeah.
to me, it's just crazy. I get a different time.
But it goes on today with a lot of the stuff that we're seeing with the Middle East and people killing each other for religion and Sunni versus Shia, and it's like,
yeah, it's still, I still think it's crazy.
Yeah.
I thought it's crazy back then. It's crazy now. It's just kind of, yeah. But
Yeah.
that's a whole different discussion.
yeah,
King Francis of France. I like his name, like Francis of France.
yeah, but it was Francois.
Francois of Francois, whatever. He just seems to like make everyone happy. Like he's like signing treaties with this person,
Yeah.
signing treaties with that person. Oh, bring Anne on over. We'll have a big party and welcome her, even though the rest of the world is not hip with this. And
Yeah.
he's like Mr. Friendly.
Well, he found himself in a really interesting position here because a lot of it was this interesting triangle that was going on with foreign policy that was always shifting, because it was France, the empire, and England, and it was like this constant in the 16th century. You constantly saw this people going back and forth, and like which one's the odd one out. And Henry tried to break away from that when he married Anne of Cleves and get some of the German states on his side and bring them into it, but they just weren't big enough. So those were like the main three superpowers, right? And so it was like figuring out playing each other off of each other, and at this
he
point,
was kind of in the middle because like England and
it's
Spain
funny
are just
because
like enemies.
other times in history, Henry was in the middle because like very early on, the empire, his father-in-law Ferdinand was at total war with France, and Henry was the one in the middle and could choose like where he wanted to be. And so here, Francis is in the middle. He's at
Just
that
positioning himself, kind of.
Yes. Also, I want to say, because the mic might be picking it up, we live out in the countryside and there's a lot of dogs barking. So if you hear that, that's what's going on.
Sorry for all the dogs.
And we'll leave the window open, but I just wanted to tell people we don't like live in a kennel. We just live in the country.
We just live close to a kennel, it seems. Smeaton, the violin player.
Yes.
I think we already mentioned this, but he dies, huh?
Yeah, he does.
He needs to quit making eyes at Anne, like right in front of Henry, like
Yeah.
playing his violin, giving little eyes.
Yeah.
He's treading in dangerous water.
And he would, I
This
think
guy.
he would ultimately confess to adultery with Anne.
Dude, play your violin for someone else.
Right. It's interesting though, like how much you have to watch that, right? Like, is it Anne didn't ask to have him come to, and suddenly,
Yeah.
like other people saying things
Yeah.
can affect you.
Yeah. So, okay, I was really confused. Like, Cromwell and Boleyn had that conversation where the dad Boleyn, says, is it Thomas? Or,
Yes, they're both Thomases.
okay, Thomas Boleyn says, hey,
To Thomas Cromwell.
yeah, like, what's your deal? And he says, oh, I don't want to reform the church. I want to dismantle the whole thing or whatever. And, Boleyn says, oh, I think we understand each other or something. I was confused. Like, do they like each other? Do they not like each other? Are they on the same side?
Yeah, I think
I'm
they're
just
on the same
confused
side.
by the
And
whole
at this
thing.
point, it's still heretical, and it will remain heretical to talk about completely dismantling the church like that. But Cromwell was the architect of the dissolution of the monasteries, and he's the one who's responsible largely for the church, for breaking down the monastic orders in England.
So it was almost like they were both getting that they were both on the same side, but
Exactly.
they couldn't really
Say
talk
it.
about it. So they were just kind of like, oh, wink, wink.
Yeah.
All right, I see where you stand, and
Yes.
this is where I stand, but I can't actually say it. So.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes a little more sense. Cromwell ends up getting killed too, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Not for a little while, though. He outlives Anne. He actually is the architect of Anne Boleyn's downfall as well.
Man, so in the end, they're not friends. Him and Thomas Boleyn.
Well, Thomas Boleyn survives all of that because he kind of turns on his daughter.
Throws her under the bus. Sounds
Yeah.
about right. He's a pretty conniving dude.
Yeah.
All right. Was Anne truly made the Marquess of Pembroke?
Yes.
And she really received, I mean, maybe not an exact number, but like
Yeah, she got a
£100,000 a
ton.
year.
Yep.
Wow.
Well, it was lands worth that, right? So he
Okay.
ennobled her, and that's one of the privileges of being a king is that you have all of the land and you can give it. And that's why one of the reasons Henry wanted the church is the largest landowner, right? But once Henry can take some of that land back, he can give it to people, sell it to people, create friends because he's suddenly giving all this land to people.
Give it to
So-
French people to make friends with them.
Exactly.
All right. So on to the jewels.
Yes.
Like, to me,
I know you hate Anne Boleyn.
whatever. I just the whole situation. I get it's. I mean, I get it's like it's not like she can just step out of the situation now.
Uh-huh.
So I get
Yeah.
it's not all her. I mean,
Yeah.
she, she's in too deep at this point, and you
Yeah.
just gotta go with things. But to me, it just seems really kind of like gross almost, like to be wearing like Catherine's jewels. And I mean, I know they're not Catherine's, but the Queen of England's. But just I don't. It's just. Like, I wouldn't even want, like, I'd want to put them away. Like, I'm a different person, but it's just,
Yeah.
it's just, like, do you think Anne felt kind of victorious, like, getting those?
I
or...
think more than anything, so you have to remember by this point, there's been speculation that she's his whore, that she's his mistress.
I see. So
for
it's
5
almost
years.
like a validation
Yeah.
of, okay.
And she wasn't. She wasn't doing, she was, she, and half of the court thinks she's the great whore, and that he's just, and also because he slept with her sister, and so he's just going to sleep with her and then leave her. And it's been 5 years of her, more than that, like 5-6 years of her growing older, not being able to make a marriage, not being able to have children, not being able to do any of that stuff because her life is just in frickin' limbo. And meanwhile, everybody's saying all this crap about her. And finally, she gets the jewels of the Queen of England. I mean, to me, I would be like, yeah, I'm going to wear those
I
things.
get that. I mean, looking at it like that, I understand.
Yeah.
It still just seems...
It's like suddenly she's seen, like, yeah, all you people who said all this crap about me and all this stuff that I've been spending my life, like, waiting for, it's suddenly all starting to happen for her.
It seems like she's proud of stealing someone's man. I don't know. I don't like it. Whatever, we've gone over this.
But can you, I mean, like, do you have any sense of the, like, there was no such thing as romantic love in the way that we know it within marriages at that time. I mean, there just wasn't. Oh, you're smiling. You're just like...
Unless you were truly in love. Whatever. We
Agree
to disagree.
If Arthur hadn't died, she would have spent her life being queen with Arthur.
Yeah, but maybe she didn't love him. We can't ask Anne or Catherine because she's gone.
She was
but
6 years older than Henry when she married him.
I
He
can-
was a
I can-
teenager,
I can,
and she
I
was
can
in her
read
mid
her heart
twenties.
through the dramatization of 21st century filmmaking.
God, you just kill me. I just can't even. I just can't.
All right, so the French queen really wouldn't meet Anne.
No, there was nobody to receive her, and actually,
God.
she couldn't leave Calais
Oh,
because
no.
she couldn't go onto French soil because she
They
would have
wouldn't
been.
even allow it.
Well, no, it's like they would have allowed it, but it would have been such a snub to her that, like, who would have received her? The maid,
Yeah.
you know, like
Yeah.
she's here being shown off as the future Queen of England,
Yeah.
and who's going to meet her? Some
And we have
minor Duchess
some
of something.
lady named Tanya. Or
Exactly.
something. Yeah.
Yeah. So she didn't even leave Calais because, yeah. So
No offense to anyone named Tanya. It's just random.
I used to
name.
work with a Tanya.
Yeah, I was really good friends with a Tanya growing up.
Nice.
And do you think like the French king was like, oh, they changed their mind? I mean, do you think they ever?
No,
the
it
first
was
place,
actually a big deal that they didn't.
Okay.
Yeah, she knew from the get-go.
That she was not going to meet.
Yeah, it was going to be an issue. It was an issue from the start of who was going to meet her.
And everyone just kept bailing, like, I'm not meeting her. I ain't
Yeah,
meeting her.
pretty much.
I'm not accepting her.
And I think that would have been really hard for her because, you know, she grew up at the French court.
Mm-hmm.
So these are like people that she knew and admired and served.
So the women of the French court agree with me.
No, the women of the French court do not agree with you in terms of true love. The women of the French court agree with queenship.
They don't want to get booted themselves
Exactly,
for the
because
new Anne
also
on the block.
Francis had squidzill. I mean, he had like he had every kind of venereal disease possible to get because of all of his mistresses. Yeah, it's not necessarily that they thought Catherine was in love. It was from one monarch to another. You can't do this to monarchs.
All right.
Honestly.
Okay,
It's
and
like
then
this true love story between Henry and Anne for you. You're like,
yeah, I'm obsessed.
I just don't understand it.
It's the Spanish in me. We live in Spain, so I feel slighted. Last question. Brandon, I guess we already touched on it, but like Brandon and Boleyn, Thomas Boleyn and Charles Brandon seem to have
some mad beef with each other.
Yes, they seem to not get along. And was that?
Well, that's what we talked about. Yeah,
Okay, so we covered that.
There was a lot going on there in that relationship.
All right. Well, those are all my
right.
questions for this episode.
Awesome. So you've brought up some interesting themes here.
Mm-hmm.
And I would just like to say a quick little note on the idea of romance and stuff at that time period, right? Because you kind of brought this up.
Yes.
So people, especially nobility, did not expect to find love as we know it in a marriage. You married for dynastic reasons, you married for money, you married for land, you married to merge families into an even greater future family.
Yep.
And you, of course, were supposed to love your spouse as was the duty from the Bible, but you did not expect to get romantic love from your spouse. And that's where this whole thing of courtly love came in. And that's what would undo Anne, because Anne played the courtly love game and it didn't go well for her. But, people would have, you would say, will you be my mistress, right? But that didn't necessarily mean in the literal sense. It meant, like, can I write you love poems and we'll flirt with each other at court? And like,
because we're around the same age as each other and I kind of like you.
Yeah, and I'm married to
like
this person.
this 15-year-old years older than me guy who I got set up with and we can't stand each other.
Exactly. And so, I just want to touch on that it was the whole realm of courtly love. There was a whole game that had rules associated with it and everything, like what different terminology meant and could I serve you as my mistress versus, I will give up any other mistress for you. And like just all of this stuff meant different stuff. And there were all these rules about it. Now, common people could marry for love. And a lot of times noble people would, be jealous of common people because they could marry for love. But of course, the pool that you had to choose from as a commoner was like really small, right? Because you lived in a little village and you never traveled. So you weren't going to go off and meet somebody. But anyway, I just wanted to touch on that because you talked about that.
And I just want to throw in defense of myself. Everyone
Yes.
knows different things. So I may not know much about history.
Oh God, are you going to say you know a lot about love?
No, no. I just think that I bet a lot of people have never even heard of like rings in the group theory, like meaning of them in mathematics.
Oh, I see. Yes.
And it's some pretty poetic, beautiful stuff going on with numbers and things like that. And a lot of people have never even heard of that. And
No, for
I'm
sure.
not judging them on it. So don't judge me
don't
on my
judge you.
absolute lack of common knowledge about anything that happened before last week.
So yeah, to that person who wrote that review, he's not faking.
No, I'm really not. And look up rings. There's some pretty cool stuff going on there.
Awesome. Okay, well, thanks for listening. Remember to check out watchingthetudors.com. Leave us a review on iTunes. And thanks for listening. And we'll be back in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, we'll see you soon. Thanks.
All right. Bye.